Welcome, everybody. The freelancers are assembling tonight to bring you a special episode of Freelancer Radio in which we do an Avengers Endgame Spoilercast. With me tonight, I have KJ.
Hello.
And I also have Marlon.
Robot Bay is down.
And the gorgeous and dark Justin. So all of us, we've all seen Endgame. KJ's seen it twice. I think he's going to watch it for the third time, possibly next week. Marlon's seen it. I've seen it. We all loved it. We all liked it. And we're going to get right into it. And we're going to start off with a little bit of a breakdown of the movie. And I've sort of broken it down into 3 acts, and I really want to get into the first one. And I really want to talk about that opening scene with Hawkeye and his family and how they sort of all disintegrate. But before that, I just love the subtle moments that they have, the characters have with one another. Maybe KJ, maybe you can talk to that a little more.
The subtle moments that the characters have with one another. Are you talking about the character like Hawkeye and his daughter there?
I was trying to get to his kids. Where one of them was like, "Who has mayo with a hot dog?" I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I have my own. I've got kids. I've got 4 kids, 2 of which do not live with me, so it's one of those things where I don't see them all that often and stuff like that. And it was kind of one of those moments where, the relationship father-daughter there actually kind of reminded me a little bit of me and my son, and it was one of those things where it was real touching. I kind of felt for Hawkeye in that moment, and in the moments where they disappeared, like really just kind of hit home for me, man. I was immediately like tearing up in this movie, and we're just moments in to the start of it. So real heartfelt moment for me there, and just. I can feel what he went through in those moments personally, just in my own experience with my own children. So it was a little bit of a rough scene.
One of the things that I really liked about that scene, although Barton, Hawkeye is a main Avenger, he was totally out of Infinity War. But one of the things that brought home to me that scene was the fact that, hey, when Big Baddie Thanos snapped his fingers in Infinity War, it wasn't just the people that we saw die on screen who were affected. Like 50% of every single living thing was affected, and that really brought it home. What about you, Marlon? What did you think of that scene?
The thing for me, it showed that it gave you a little background of what was happening to him as a character and what was happening to his family. And the thing that made me think about it was that how many people were affected that way, as opposed to just the main cast. How many people were just enjoying time with their families and stuff like that, or were just in the moment when all of a sudden when everything just went down. But the one thing that you touched upon that really drove it for me was the fact that, think about it, 50% of the population of the entire universe got snapped off, right? So, but that tells you that also includes people that were in airplanes, people that were pilots. So people that died due to consequences of the snap, and it drove for me was like the desperation for Hawkeye. It drove for me that it gave me like an analogy of how if you don't take things for granted, like they can go away like that without even realizing. For example, like you could say that he was looking at his daughter and he just turned around, he's just not there anymore. Then he's like, what happened? Then he turns around and in a blink of an eye, like his whole world just changed like that. And it drove the feeling of just, I don't know, man. Like KJ said, like it hit hard for me. It just really drove in the desperation, the angst that he had. Like he didn't know what just happened. I'm guessing that he probably realized that after he met up with some of the other people, because that after this he went into Avengers mode, like even more than Tony Stark, like in Iron Man 3 or something like that.
Yeah, mentioning Stark, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit within the timeline of that movie of Endgame, and just we find Tony up in space with Nebula, trying to, buy some time, he's trying to figure out what he can do to get back home, and he sort of realizes like there's nothing that I can do. And then out of nowhere, KJ's favorite character of all time, Captain Marvel, played by none other than the most beautiful actress in the world, Brie Larson.
Don't even start with me, man. It's horrible, dude.
She comes from
it's
space,
so wrong.
and she brings him back home.
But of course she does, because that's what she's there for. She is the most powerful Avenger. Didn't have to do anything, just became the most powerful Avenger overnight. It was amazing. Now, nobody can stand up to her. Nobody can do nothing. And that's what she's here for. She's here to save the day. So
I want to get into that scene when she lands on Earth, and she brings Tony back home. And one of the first tugging of the heartstrings really was when Tony spoke to Cap, and he tells him, I lost a kid. And man, that was emotional for me. That was something else that that sort of put it in perspective. Like, man, Spider-Man's gone, even though we know he's coming back in the next sequel of
Far From Home.
Far From Home. Gee,
yeah.
Can you get your things straight when you talk? God.
So what do you guys think of the conversation between Cap and Tony? What do you guys think about that? And I'm referencing that little sort of tension that they had, and I really love that as a character development for Tony, because Tony just stayed the same. You could tell that after Civil War and after Age of Ultron, there was a little bit of resentfulness between those two characters. Like KJ, for example, what do you think about that?
Well, I thought it was Tony actually comes back and takes Cap's own words in that moment and throws it back in his face. You said if we were going to lose, we'd do it together, and we did. We lost. Yep. And he just kind of really just very bluntly lays it out for Cap.
Yeah, I love when he references, in one fell swoop, he references both Civil War and Age of Ultron, where he's like, I told you we needed this pseudo armor, around the world, right? And independent, regardless of your precious freedoms, right? I was right, and you were wrong. And man, that was like peak Tony, back in 2008, being arrogant and full of himself. But he was right at that point.
Yeah. I mean, he was right, but I mean, I don't think you can ever balance security and freedom. It's just something that
it's hard. It's straddle that line.
It's a very difficult balance, and I really think that that's what Civil War was trying to speak to. Me personally, if it comes down to that Civil War argument, security or freedom, I'm on the side of freedom myself.
Agreed.
But I just, it's definitely a difficult conversation. It's a difficult way to look at things, and it's definitely parallels a lot of what goes on in the world today. I think that's one of the things that Marvel does so well, and one of the reasons why these movies are as popular as they are is that there are parallels to everything that's going on around us in the real world, but it gives us enough of that fantasy to take us out of our element and give us a little bit of a break from it as well.
This is true. One of the things that I really liked about the movie was how quickly it sort of got us started. Right, we find our heroes, they're down and out, right? Captain Marvel saves Tony, and then all of a sudden Nebula helps them find Thanos, and literally within 15 minutes of the movie, he's dead. Our reality timeline, Thanos is gone. I remember he's just dead, and it was so cool the way he was taken out by Thor, who, man, we're gonna get into it later, but I loved Thor's entire arc in Endgame, starting over in Infinity War, but he just right with Stormbreaker, he chops his head off, and he tells him, hey, I went for the head, just like you told me to back in Infinity War. Oh man, Marlon, Justin, you got anything to say regarding how Thor took out Thanos?
Yeah, he's dead.
This guy, I swear to God.
So if any of the listeners listened to our last podcast with the 5 obsessions with I was watching Game of Thrones for the past week and a half, and when Thor chopped his head off, I was expecting a more graphic chop his head off, and then it was just simply swing, swoosh, head comes off, and I was like, oh. I was looking for like the blood and the guts and the stuff to come out of the top of his head.
Oh,
So it was
Lord.
kind of like a oh, there it is. It just happened. All right, cool.
Anticlimactic for you, gotcha.
So
One of the
yeah,
things that I liked about that scene, I'm going to cut you off here, but one of the things that I really liked about before they chopped his head off was how subtle they show off Thanos. Right when you first see him, he's picking fruit, he's cooking, he's tending to himself. He just seems like a regular, normal man, just living his life after what he had done.
he accomplished his mission is what he did.
Exactly.
He did it. He did it. He accomplished what he needed to do, and he did it. And now he went to go and essentially just retire and just live out the rest of his days.
And I thought that the beginning of Thanos in Endgame were pretty solid, at least up to that first act, because they show him picking fruit, they show him cooking. It's also borne out to be true that he destroyed the stones. I love it when Nebula says, "Hey, listen, my dad is many, many things, but a liar isn't one of them," and I love that part. So in keeping with who that character was in Infinity War, they're very, very consistent. Because he's like, hey, listen, I did what I needed to do. I didn't want power out of this. I just needed to do something selfless. And then they sort of reverse course, and as the movie goes on. But I didn't really like that. But that's basically what happens at the end of the first act, and then we get like this aerial shot. 5 years later, we see Lady Liberty surrounded by all these ships, which is like the weirdest thing I've ever seen. We see City Field. Right, the Mets. Joe Russo makes a cameo in like this self help like little workshop that Captain America is carrying out with like people trying to get over what happened.
That's actually a really, really big key scene right there, and that's that conversation I'm going back to when I threw it back at you guys on the Discord. So I'll save that for later when we get to the more epic parts. But just note that is a huge key scene that happens later in the movie, which will help them in the long run. And going back to what Goose is saying is that they're like in their little psychiatrist therapist session, their little AA meeting, if you will, where they're like trying to how these people try to move on with their lives after 5 years of the devastation, after initially the first snap and then killing Thanos.
Snap anonymous.
It was really
Okay.
tough moment.
I just loved it that it was Cap. I'm like, man, this character, this man, he doesn't know anything else other than to help people. And I just love that on the stage, on the facade of it, it just said for God and country. And I'm like, yeah, this is totally Captain America. KJ, what'd you think of that? What'd you think of that moment?
Well, I mean, the whole thing with the I don't know what you want to call it, the support meeting, type deal. That in itself, I can imagine that situation. I mean, because there had to be so much desperation, and calling back a little bit to what Marlon was saying, he had mentioned, well, he snaps the fingers and planes could possibly be falling out of the sky and all of these other things going on. So there's the opportunity where there's actually more than 50% of the people on the earth that could have been wiped out from that snap. And they kind of allude a little bit to that at the very end of Infinity War in the post-credit scene with Nick Fury.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, the snap happens, and then cars are crashing, and then all of a sudden a helicopter comes out of the sky, crashes into the building. Obviously there's going to be more casualties from there. So, and then it's even more alluded to as to how desperate the world is in general in the next part, where Ant-Man is walking towards his daughter's home, and the little boy rides up on the bike, and he's like, "What happened?" And the kid just like gives him like this death stare and just like takes off, man.
Like, how dare you not know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I mean, it really would be an event like that. Really would be an event that would touch the lives of every single human being in the world, and not just in. I mean, could you imagine just thinking of if all of a sudden 50% of the people that are in your life right now were just gone.
Or even more. I mean, you look at Hawkeye, and he got the short end of the stick, dude. He lost
Oh,
everybody.
and he lost everybody just
Yeah.
in moments. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I really kind of feel for Hawkeye. I think that I would probably react in very much the same way myself.
I think it's not only the fact that Hawkeye is a family man. He lost his daughters, his wife, and his whole family. That I think he's more kind of taking the same route as Thor was taking. That maybe if he didn't leave the Avengers and he was actually part of them fighting Thanos the first time, maybe he could have done something more, and that's why his family's gone now. You have to realize that he was one of them, but he left them to be with his family, and in doing so, his family's now gone.
But just to be clear, Thor did fight at the Infinity War battle.
No, Thor did. I'm
Yeah.
talking about Hawkeye.
Gotcha.
I'm saying like Hawkeye probably thinks he could have done something more, other than play the retiree, father and be with his family.
Yeah,
And that's probably another reason why he went so rogue.
I'll say this:
Thor's thought of having to do something more was the fact that, I mean, literally, he's face to face with the
he's a
giant
god,
man.
Yeah,
and he's sitting there, and then he just looks him dead in the eye, and Thanos just lets him know how much he's screwed up, man.
Yeah.
Right there, eye to eye, and goes, "You should have went for the head," and then literally ends, 50% of the universe with a snap.
Right.
I
mean, you could clearly see that Stormbreaker was just so overpowered. Like
Yes,
when
man.
he used the whole gauntlet in Infinity War and blasted at Thor, and he just chucks that thing. The thing just eats up that beam and hits Thanos straight in the chest. So you got to know, being the most overpowered, one of the most overpowered Marvel characters, as Thor likes to say, strongest Avenger in all of his movies, he failed.
It's
5 years in, one of the things that I do notice is that although catastrophe has struck, and actually, you know what? There's a thought that I'm gonna go back, because there's a thought that I actually wanted to say that KJ made me think about. KJ, you mentioned Scott Lang, Ant-Man, going through those monuments, and that, I'm from New York City. I was around, and I remember when the towers fell, and I've been down to Ground Zero, and I've seen the names of the victims who perished on that day, and when I saw that in the theaters, that it just brought me right back to the Freedom Tower, and the monument that they have for the people who passed away on that fateful day, and that was just such a strong visual, especially when he's up close and he's reading the names. And I'm like, man, I didn't lose anybody, but thousands of, hundreds of people did on that day. And I'm talking about Endgame. And I'm like, that really just stuck with me. That visual of him reading through the names to see who had passed away. He wanted to see if Cassie's daughter had passed away. That was such a strong moment. I was like, wow, that's.
Could you imagine looking? I mean, he's there. He's frantic. He's looking for his daughter in that moment, right? But who does he find? He finds himself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How crazy would that be to be, because his mind is not in that, to him, it's been moments.
That's right.
It's been hours, and he's not thinking about the fact that, oh, I'm one of the missing. And that kind of probably really put it in perspective. He's sitting there frantic looking for Cassie, and he's been gone for 5 years, and then he finds his own name, and then he's like, they've been looking for me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else in my life went through this process looking for me. And that, I just thought that was pretty awesome. And then the scene that immediately follows with his daughter was just so cool, because his daughter actually takes up the mantle in the comics. Not Ant-Man, but she takes on, I don't remember the name of the character, but she takes on the mantle basically of Ant-Man and carries it on. And that was really kind of cool in that moment where once again you see it's like a juxtaposition of what happened with Hawkeye. Now you see this family reunion, and then you see it again with Tony and Pepper as well. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I wanted to touch on. Like I mentioned before, I went back to Ant-Man. There is like this huge dissonance between people who were affected for the worse and people who were affected for the better. Like, Barton is just killing people, taking out his vengeance. Hopefully he thinks that if he can kill enough baddies, he can fill up that hole in his heart, which obviously he's never going to be able to do. And there's a shout out to the Ronin character, to the who Bendis created back in New Avengers. Mm-hmm. But then you have folks like Tony, who, like, he has a wife in Pepper, he has a child in Morgan Stark. Question: when they show off the kid, actually before they show off the kid that he goes to her little hut in the woods or whatever, who thought it was a dog?
I didn't.
No, I didn't. No,
I thought it was a dog, man.
No, I thought he had gone crazy.
I thought it was I knew they had to have gone to a kid, because he was going to need something to fight for after Peter was gone. Mm-hmm. That was the way I looked at it. Is there had to have been a child involved for Tony to get, because all right, so Tony's always been able to as much as you want to say he can look at his spouse and say, I'm going to stay here for you, right? Tony's always been willing to leave Pepper behind and go take on the world. So there had to be something greater.
An anchor
and,
of sorts.
And that something greater was both the reason for him to stay and the reason for him to go.
Well, you have to realize that there were so many mixed emotions going on. You had people reacting to different ways. You had Tony accepting it, moving on, starting a family. You had Hawkeye going rogue and killing people. You had Captain trying to help people, just trying to help people move on. And then you have someone like Black Widow. She kept on trying to find a way. She kept on working. She took over the mantle of Nick Fury, and she was trying to find a way to keep it going.
You had Banner. I love that. Hulk became Professor Hulk.
Yeah,
although
that was
we're going to get into this later, but I hate the fact that Bruce Banner's biggest struggle, which was how can I reconcile these two people, Jekyll and Hyde, that was done off camera. Yeah, and I resented that. I'm like, how dare you reconcile that and fix that issue off camera? How dare you?
Well, they had to fix that issue. Everyone was fixing their own issues off camera, because you can't do the whole lifetime of 5 years in a few moments.
Yeah, I kind of wish they had I'm hoping that there's a flashback or something in a future movie that shows a little bit of that, because I really think that was something that they should have shown, especially after in Infinity War, Banner's in the Hulkbuster suit, and he's like yelling at Hulk, "Come out!" and Hulk kind of like appears and is like, "No," and he just goes away.
I'm okay, fan. I'm okay. What? I'm not dealing with that.
Does anybody feel that Professor Hulk was a lot smaller than the regular Hulk?
Oh.
Let me just jump on this one real quick. So, anyway, one of the things with the Hulk, and it hasn't really been shown in the MCU,
right?
But one of the things about Hulk in the actual comics is
he gets angrier, he gets bigger.
Angrier he gets, the bigger he gets.
Right.
And I think that was kind of something that they were attempting to show a little bit there.
Yeah, which I think they succeeded in, because I thought he looked a lot smaller.
Yeah, because he not only looked smaller as in height, but he looked like more slender.
Yeah,
right.
Well.
Exactly.
Everything
He was
It's-
leaned out.
more
Yeah, he
compact.
was leaned out.
Honestly, talking about Professor Hulk, the fact that and this is just jumping up a little bit into when we get into the time heist, but that scene when seeing his old self, for me, was the funniest thing. He goes, yeah, okay, a little bit gratuitous,
Yeah.
but whatever. It's like,
He picks up the motorcycle and just kind of like
places
tosses it,
like,
like,
Yeah.
just like lightly kind of like throws it to the side.
Dude, it reminded me of Monster Inc. Like,
Oh, yeah.
It's like like okay, whatever. Dude, that for me was just like one of the funniest things because you could tell that he looked like embarrassed at doing this thing. He's like, I have grown up. I am more wise. I have become a better person. I don't want to be this Neanderthal. Okay.
So now we're gonna come up to like one of the. I don't want to make it a big problem. I promise I won't. But one of the first issues that I had, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And that's when Lang proposes the idea. Hey, listen, we can use time travel to try to get these stones back. And Stark is like, no, we can't. I've thought about it. And then Friday figures it out like in less than 15 seconds. And I'm like, oh man, am I gonna have to? I gotta suspend disbelief here. Like I totally didn't buy that at all. Like that. Like I remember I had like a visceral reaction in the theater. Like I can't swear, but I was like, this is bull crap. Like immediately when I saw that Friday just had that algorithm
Well, it wasn't
running.
Friday that thought it out.
Well,
It wasn't Friday that figured it out. It was Tony. Tony was working on it. Tony was just giving input commands to the computer. Because he said, okay, he says, let's try that again, but I'm going to change the shape. And then he says, do this. I don't remember the exact words, and I'm not going to because I didn't take notes of exact words in the theater. But he basically, he says, well, what if we do it like this and we change the shape to this? And then when they did that is when it worked. So I don't think it was Friday that figured it out. I think it was Tony that figured it out, and he was just manipulating the data.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he just plugged the formula and everything.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Even if it was that way, I just still didn't buy it. I'm like, Tony Stark is like one of the biggest geniuses in the MCU, and I'm like, I mean, it's something small to nitpick, but it's something that I just remember having like a visceral reaction at the theater. Like, I don't buy it.
But the thing is that there was new information that was given.
Right.
Nobody even realized the quantum realm existed, with the exception of Scott Lang.
I mean, so he was
Tony
still
would have
thinking
thought about it. Yeah,
He would have thought about it, but he didn't know it was real.
And he dismissed it right away, like hocus pocus type deal. He's like, no, we can't do this. It's not feasible.
Yeah.
Well, he did because he had certain things that he had thought about, but I don't think he was fully taking into consideration the new information that was brought to him through Scott Lang. And it just took him a while because that's always been kind of the way Tony works, honestly.
Yeah. Sort of like, yeah.
He always dismisses everything, right? That's impossible. It's stupid, whatever. And then his mind almost like takes over, And that's one of the things that Pepper keeps going back to in the movie is, now you can rest. That term, are you going to be able to rest? It's been something that's been very consistent throughout all of the Iron Man movies, all of the movies that have involved Iron Man, as just a continuous thing with Tony Stark is that he can't sleep until the problem is solved. And that's why he made the 9,000 different versions of the Iron Man armor, to protect the world.
Yeah, he had like the Mark 1, the Mark 5, the Mark 8, just kept on going.
He just kept going because he couldn't sleep because he had the dream. Then he went up into the, I don't know whether it was a wormhole or whatever it was in the first Avengers movies, and he was the one that actually saw, the vastness of Thanos's army up there.
The threat that was coming.
Yeah, that was still coming through. I mean, yeah, they stopped it, but he knew what was coming, and it's just, I don't know, man. I think that's just one of the things about Tony Stark is he just doesn't rest until he figures it out. And even though he was very negative about it, he was going to stick on it until he figured some way to do it.
I think that, yeah. you've made a fine argument in saying, hey, listen, you may not have liked it, but this is in keeping with the character. This is in keeping with who he is. But then conversely, after right after he goes to Pepper and he's like, hey, I figured it out, and she knew what that meant. And I just felt like that moment that they had, like this heartfelt moment where he's like, and it sort of felt like a very, I'm gonna bring some gaming into it. It sort of felt like The Last of Us, where Ellie, she asks Joel, hey, did you do this? Right? And she's basically she's giving him permission to lie. And I felt that in that instance, Tony was giving Pepper, like, he's like, hey, I can have an out here. You can be it. If you tell me don't go, I won't do it. Right? And she's like, if I tell you not to do it, you still won't be able to rest over it. And I just love that line, because she, like, it's just such a, that relationship between them, it felt so, I don't want to say wholesome, but it felt so genuine. Like, people in relationships who love one another, and not so much love one another, but who understand one another, like, that comes through. That's what really happens. And I just love that one moment between Pepper and Tony.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty amazing, to be honest with you. I mean, that's one of those things where, that's the type of, I don't know, love and understanding that you look for in a real relationship, And I just think that's one of those, that's another one of those great things that I think that the Marvel movies do, is that they bring real dynamic relationships to the superhero genre. A lot of the stuff, if you look at even going to like a Christopher Nolan type Batman or something like that, I mean, it's very much a comic booky style relationship. Bruce Banner's like this brooding dude, but somehow, all of a sudden, or not Bruce Banner, I'm sorry.
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne's like this brooding dude, but then all of a sudden, all the ladies want to be around him, and it's like, you know what? If you're like some angry dude all the time, it doesn't really matter how much money you have. No, ladies just ain't going to want to be around you if you're just pissed off all the time. And then I just think that the relationships and the dynamics of the relationships in the Marvel movies are so much better than those in some of the other superhero movies. I think this is definitely one of the good example.
Well, if you look at it, that all these Marvel movies, at least the majority of them, they all had some kind of like father figure like issues, some kind of fatherly figure issues. So if you think about it, Tony Stark and his father, they had like that disconnect with each other. Obviously Nebula and Gamora, they have that disconnect with Thanos. You also have
Thor and Odin.
Exactly.
Loki as well. Yeah.
They have Loki, especially. They have a disconnect. So this whole 10-year plan, this whole 22 film, phase one of Marvel, I think resolved like around the father figure and
daddy
them
issues.
having that exactly. It was just all daddy issues. Just everyone throw it out onto the board. So.
That's what the 22 movie collection should be called.
Daddy.
Daddy issues.
Honestly, going back into the whole time travel thing, the one thing that really made me like enjoy this whole situation with the time travel was the fact that they would start referencing all these other movies that deal with time travel. Hot Tub Time Machine, Back to the Future,
I've seen that one. I've seen that one as well.
When we had that scene with Rhodey and who was he and Scott Lang, not to come off like a
elitist,
snooty, like an elitist or a snooty type, but I'm like, these are the Russos literally breaking the fourth wall and saying, we get that we're doing time travel. Who cares about how it works? Just go along with us. I loved it, dude, because suffice to say, my supervisor ruined that moment for me, and I knew he did as soon as I saw his face when I explained, hey, listen, you just ruined this for me, didn't you? And I just saw his face. I'm like, yeah, he just ruined this big plot device for me. And he did, because I figured it out. Once he told me, hey, there's time travel in this, I'm like, oh, that's what they're going to do to bring the people back. You just ruined it. You should have just shut your mouth.
Yeah, but they didn't use time travel to bring the people back. It was the snap that brought the people back.
No, but the point
it was the device to get the stones to actually work the plot along.
I'm just saying. I'm gonna say it.
He's being Lee. He's being Lee.
The point that I'm trying to make. the point that I'm trying to make is that, hey, I got the gist of it when my supervisor said, hey, listen,
Yeah.
time travel is a big narrative device here. And I
Yeah,
sort of knew what they were going to do in it. And I didn't like that at all. But I did like the fact that the Russos called attention to it. Like, I felt like they were talking to me. They're like, hey, dude, we know that there's a guy out there just like you who hates the time travel stuff, and we're calling you out. Let it go and just go along for the ride. And that I did love. That I did love.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was actually a really good scene in general. I thought that was pretty cool when they're all just kind of sitting around there talking about it, and they're rattling off all the different movie titles.
Right.
I thought that was good. That was like kind of like a given props to all these other movies that have touched the time travel genre. You know,
Yeah.
I think that was really cool of them to even do that, because you won't see. They look at. Everybody seems to look at everybody else as competitors, and
Right.
Even bringing up the name of another movie within your movie is kind of
Blasphemy.
You don't do that. And they went ahead and they just rattled off like this whole list. And I
Honestly,
just thought
for
that
me-
was fantastic.
For me, what that told me was that is, even though this is like the MC universe and stuff like that, this is Marvel and stuff like that, it's grounded in reality. It's grounded in our society. It's grounded in our America. Just the things that we watched as kids, the things that we grew up watching. Back to the Future, Drifter, stuff like that. So for me, when Scott Lang says, "You're telling me Back to the Future's a bunch of BS," dude, I started losing it there, man. I was just laughing my butt off in that, because
Yeah.
Scott Lang was like in that scene trying to get the time travel thing to work. When they ask him, did he travel through time or did time travel through him? That scene was like, and
It's
even Tony
like,
Stark
Tony
like,
pulls up and he's like, "You turned him into a baby, didn't you?"
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
I'm glad that actually KJ brought that up, because I think in that moment, when after he mentions that was the official truce apology between him and Cap, because I know even though in the very beginning they lost the battle and everything, and he's still upset. I think at that moment, especially right before he gives Captain America his shield from the trunk of his car, saying, "Here, take this. You're gonna need this. Don't lose it again, or I'm taking it." I think that was the official final apology, like what happened back in Civil War. I forgive, and I want to move on, and let's get this right.
And I
I
sort of
think
feel.
I think it was an acknowledgement. I think you're absolutely correct, and I think it was I think the fact of Tony having the shield and handing it off to Cap was an acknowledgement of it's not about freedom and it's not about security. It's about freedom and security, and you need me as much as I need you.
Yeah, and the past is the past.
Exactly.
And I also felt like it was a good callback to Avengers 1, where there was a little bit of tension between both Tony and Cap. Where Tony, Cap basically tells Tony, "Hey, you've never really put any skin in the game. You're a daddy's boy. You were spoiled and all this stuff. I fought in countless wars. I'm selfless." Cap didn't necessarily say those exact words, but I love the subversion of that, because we have Tony coming back, who, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, if he wants to be a selfless, like not nice person, he could have totally done that, and he would have, and I wouldn't have judged him for it. But the fact that he comes back and says, "Hey, listen, now I'm going to risk the biggest skin that I have, and that's my daughter. That's the life that I currently have now." So I personally took it as a subtle callback to Avengers 1, and I love the parameters when Tony comes back and he gives Caps his shield. The parameters are, we're gonna go back in time. We are going to bring these people back. We are not going to lose anything that we have gained. And I just love that, because I'm like, yeah, he's thinking of his daughter. Like that's exactly who he's thinking about. He's like, I don't want to lose this. This is precious to me. And oh man, that moment was really significant for me. When they basically bury the hatchet, as it were.
Yeah, no, that was pretty amazing, to be honest with you. I love that whole where it was like the gang was getting back together there,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a bunch of like very small, like little funny moments that all kind of came in there as well, right? You had the ship landing with Rocket and Nebula, and they blow over Scott Lang's taco, and Hulk hands him another taco, and it's like all these little kind of funny, subtle moments, which was almost like the opposite of the moments of the 5 years just previous, where you had Nebula and Rocket holding hands because they just realized that they just lost everybody, and you had all these different versions and different people all kind of doing their own mourning of what had just happened. So this was almost like the opposite of, okay, we're getting the gang back together and spirits are starting to lift again.
And before I move on to the heist part of the film, which I thought was like, wow, okay, now it's a heist film. Can we talk about how we find Thor? I mean, oh man, it was so depressing to see him. He just kept losing over. Like, he lost his dad, he lost his mom, he lost his brother. He wasn't able to take out the guy who initiated the initial snap. And then he's like overweight. He's playing video games. He's a drunkard.
He's playing Fortnite.
Yeah, see, I think that really the Thor, like, they brought Thor back to in the heist part of the movie. They brought Thor back to the dark world because I really feel like that's where that whole story started, because that's the first time Thor really experienced true loss.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, he lost his mother, and he thought he lost Loki. Right, and then it keeps going, and then he reconnects with Loki, but then he loses Odin. Then he loses everybody, and somewhere in between there, between the Dark World and Ragnarok, he loses Jane, because even in Ragnarok, I don't know if you guys remember, but he goes looking for Odin, and him and Loki are standing there in front of the nursing home that Loki had dropped Odin off at, and two girls come up and they're like, "Can we take your picture?" And they're like, "Oh, we're sorry about Jane," and he's like, "Oh." And just in very Thor fashion, he's like, I broke up with her. She didn't break up with me, kind of thing. Just like he's always kind of playing it off like he's tough and manly and whatever. And
I would have said in very Justin fashion.
But then, to see Thor, after being this, the most powerful Avenger, and really proving that in a lot of ways, even though he lost in Infinity War, to see him the way that he was, it was just, I mean, that was tough, man, to see him like he really, but again, that goes right back to what I said before, where they put these characters in real situations, and I mean that's real depression that you see in that character, and that's just ate him alive.
He wasn't bathing. He was drinking. Like, I saw that, and I love that KJ just said what he said, because I couldn't have said it better. Like, we're used to seeing this, not a godlike figure. We're used to seeing a god at his peak, just being tore down throughout these films, and he hits rock bottom. The only thing that I was able to take away from Fat Thor, Big Lebowski Thor, was that I could look at him and I could say to myself, finally, I have the body of a god.
This guy, I swear.
I wrote that one down.
Arlen says that every day, but he just
God,
it's a different situation.
Yeah, this movie proves otherwise now.
I'll tell you this: the one thing that I realized when seeing that scene with Thor, just having that dad bod and stuff like that, I said to myself, "All right, well, Halloween is gonna have a lot different costumes this year when it comes to Thor. I'll tell you that, and it's gonna look just fine. It's gonna fit in right." I swear, man. It's like,
I'll be great. I could be Thor this year, man. All I need is some bunny slippers and a bathrobe. I'd be set, dude.
Dude, okay. Let's say it. It's Big Lebowski. Lebowski, okay?
And they totally played that up, though. They totally played that up.
Yeah.
They even came out and referenced it with Tony calling him Lebowski. But
don't you find that funny that Obadiah Stane was his first nemesis in Iron Man 1, who played Big Lebowski?
Big Lebowski, yeah.
That's awesome. That's kind of meta.
Amazing.
Yeah, there is
Man.
a lot of little connections like that, and that again, I mean, we've seen that over and over in these films. Not only the connections between the films, but there's all these other connections. And Lee brought our friend Lee brought up that one connection to us earlier this week that we thought was pretty cool. If you take all the run times of all 22 movies and you add them all up, it's 3,000. Just like I Love You 3000, which comes from Morgan Stark. I just thought that was so cool. And how many times I think I Love You 3000 has been said, at least 3,000 times in the last the week.
So much on Twitter. Oh my god, it's his own hashtag. It was trending.
Monkey see, monkey do. You know how people are. But
I thought that was cool how we were talking about it a little bit before we started the show, but even the numbers mean something in these movies. There's always these subtle little things that are going on, and sometimes it takes the world years to figure it out, but they eventually do, and I think that's pretty cool. I mean, just even and sometimes like the callback to where it's Peter Parker in the Iron Man mask at the World's Fair there. Mm-hmm. What was it called? The Stark Symposium or something like that. I don't remember what it was called, but
out in Flushing Meadows, Queens. Yep.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool. I mean, they go back and people bring those things up, and then
nothing is throwaway.
Yeah, nothing. You can't. You have to look at every single scene, and that scene may have some huge importance. And it may take 5 years and 7 movies, but eventually it comes back around, and I just think that's so cool, the way that they use those and work those things in.
And I think it's also respectful, like, of the fans and the viewer. Like, we're not taking you for granted. We value your time. We know that you're going to put the time and effort to figure these things out. I've always appreciated that from the writers over at Marvel. But now I want to really move on to, like, the heist part of the film, which it wasn't my favorite part of the film, but it was right up there. Like, I love, like, how that whole entire thing broke down. We had Thor and Rocket Raccoon. They went off to Asgard. We had Tony, Cap, Hulk, and Lang. They went off to the first Avengers to get a couple of the stones. Hulk broke off on his own, and I really want to get into that section with Hulk. And man, I don't know. Is it Supreme Sorcerer or Supreme Sorceress? The Tilda Swinton character who he speaks to.
The Ancient One is what her name is. The Ancient One.
The Ancient One. Okay, thanks, KJ. Yeah, I love that whole thing between them. How she basically took the monster. I love how she just separated Hulk from Banner, because I think she probably said, "Hey, listen, I can't take on Hulk, but I can take on Banner." So she just flipped them away. Yeah. I thought that was so cool.
Well, she's never been a physical. She's spiritual. So she put him on a 1-to-1 with her, is what she did by separating them out like that. But I thought that was very good. Now, I want to kind of actually, to be honest with you, I want to skip over that part if that's okay with you. I'd like to bring that back up on our next segment. To be honest with you, I'd like to bring that up.
Having said that, it's no problem. We can go back to that. But I do love when. So just real quick recap. Tony and Lang basically screw up, and Loki steals the Tesseract, which contains one of the stones, and people believe that that's gonna be a springboard for his Disney Plus show, which I totally could see happening. But then that means that Tony and Cap have to go further back in time to New Jersey in 1970 to get the stone that they need to get. And there's a couple of things that I love between that whole scene. First off, Cap has to get stones, Tony has to get stones, and Tony comes across his dad, right? And man, that I'll share a couple of personal stuff. Like, I'm not really close with my dad, right? Like, that's just not the type of relationship that we had. But that whole encounter between Tony and his father, Howard Potts and Howard Stark, man, that was just something special for me. Just you see Tony, he's looking at his dad with like these wanting eyes, and he's like, man, if I only had the time, back then to, probably do things differently. Like that, the way that whole thing played out was just special to me. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Peter.
but one of the things that I really liked about that scene as well was the fact that Tony was understanding of his father.
He wasn't judging him.
He had grown up finally, and he had realized that there was a reason that his dad really did love and care for him. It's just because he loved and cared for him is why he was doing all the things that he was doing for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tony was the inspiration for him doing, just like Morgan was the inspiration for Tony to say, okay, I've got to go, rescue the world here. I mean, and Peter as well, who Tony was also a father figure to, was another main inspiration. Tony said, he looks at the photo of Peter, and that's what makes him decide that he's got to go ahead and do this. But then he also comes back and puts that ultimatum together that we don't lose anything we have, because he's got to have Morgan in his life. So I just thought that was really cool. Another thing that was in a scene just prior to that was really neat on the heist part of this whole movie that I really loved was the callback in the elevator with Cap, and he gets on the elevator, and they have the Loki's scepter,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going down, and it's literally all the same guys that were in that elevator with him in
Winter Soldier. But
Winter Soldier.
that wasn't like, I had to look it up on the internet because I was a little confused, because watching it in the theater, I'm like, wait a minute, Winter Soldier doesn't happen like that. So it was a callback to Winter Soldier, but just to be clear to the listeners, because I know many were confused.
It was a prequel and a sequel all at the same time.
That's right. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, KJ.
Yeah, I just thought that was so neat. And then he does the Hail Hydra thing, because he knows, but they don't know.
That he knows that. Yeah.
Exactly.
I got a quick question. My theater was kind of boring except for a couple of scenes, but for that one in particular, that got the loudest, that got the biggest pop, and I didn't know why. I had to look it up once I got out of the theater. But like when he whispered Hail Hydra, like, oh my God, like everybody started cheering.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like,
I just thought that was so awesome, because it was like, I don't know, it was like this whole thing where he's ahead of his time.
Right.
As the actual sequence of movies go, but at the same time, he like totally throws all those dudes off, and then just literally walks out with the briefcase like nothing,
While they were all staring at America's ass.
Yep, exactly.
Back when Cap is in New Jersey back in 1970, one of the things that I like that the Russos do is we see the African American lady who's like with the two guards trying to get Cap, and I'm like, please don't make this into like a chase scene now, and they completely subvert that. I love that. The Russo said, no, we're going to show you that, but we're not going to do that. They whisk him away into a room, and he sees the love of his life. He sees Peggy, and I'm like, man, and he goes into, the office that he actually goes into is her office. Mm-hmm. And in her office, you see a picture of him, not when he was Captain America, but before he became, Captain America. And I love that, because to me, it was like a metaphor of, I love this man before he became who he is. I love this man for who he is. And that was just such a powerful moment. Like all these like little visual and narrative metaphors that were just being sprinkled throughout the entire film. Marlon, I want to get you in on this one. When you saw that scene, what'd you think?
Because
I know. I'm sorry, but the thing for me is this. It's this.
That's a good one.
Before he came.
Oh my gosh, that's true too.
I know.
Oh, is he blushing?
Yeah.
The funny part is that my wife actually has a picture of me when I was buff, and now she's got this.
Lord.
Thor KJ.
Thor KJ. When I saw Captain America looking at Peggy, the thing for me is that we know this guy has been panning for this girl. She is what he's been striving for all these years. This is for him the end goal that he knew he would never be able to go back to. So I knew for a fact that when Scott Lang told him, "Hey, we have the ability of being able to time travel," like you could tell Captain America was like, "This could be my only last shot."
This is my ticket.
Yep, and seeing him, just watching her and just thinking of what he wanted to be with her, like thinking about that and just seeing him like this forlorn expression about it, it reminded me of a lot of the times that I felt with my own girlfriend. Like it's we live in different areas of the world.
Continent.
It's a long distance relationship, and at times it's like I feel for Cap. I can sympathize, I can empathize with the guy because he he really loves this girl, and he cannot be with her until now, and this will play a lot later on in the movie, but just seeing that moment for me was like, man, like I feel for Cap, man.
Yeah, and how many callbacks did they have throughout the film with Cap with the picture of her? They had to have shown that like 4 or 5 times. Even when he's like fighting himself, it falls on the ground, and the other Cap is like, "Where did you get that?"
Right.
Like, because I mean there was a lot of visual cues with Peggy Carter throughout this movie, which I thought was cool because she's almost kind of been out of it for a while. Like they haven't really brought her up, and even in the Winter Soldier one, they brought her in, but they brought her in as a little old lady, and she was on her deathbed. And then they kind of brought her niece into the whole thing with Winter Soldier. That character kind of like just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I want to get into that a little later on when it comes to when we talk about Cap, because that sort of bothered me. Like, Winter Soldier is my favorite Marvel film out of all the ones that I've seen, and I don't know
why. I honestly don't know why.
It's a great film. But one of the things that anyway, we'll get into that later. But yeah, the Captain America, back in 1970 stuff was really cool. And then one of the ones that I personally didn't like at all, and we're gonna get into it now, was Natasha and Barton, and how they get their stone. Man.
So I have some background on that actually. So from what I heard, at least this is what me and my coworker were talking about, because I said, what a coincidence.
By the way, Marvel comic experts, Justin and his coworker. Continue.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. What a coincidence that those two just so happen to have to go after the Soul Stone. Because you know how awkward it would have been for Nebula and War Machine to go get the Soul Stone, and they're like, well, great, now how do we get the Soul Stone, I don't love you. You don't love me. We don't know each other.
Yeah, but I think that's a little bit of how destiny plays into this whole thing. That's the Russos kind of tipping their hat to. There's got to be a little bit of something that's the unknown that kind of plays into all this.
I might be, going into, I don't know what the saying is, but going into hot water with this, but they're saying the original script was for Hawkeye to sacrifice himself, because the whole, he lost his family thing and so on and so forth. And tell my family I love them. But it was, I guess the rumor was, according to my coworker, which I told him to forward me the source, and he didn't forward me the source. He said it was somebody else on set who told the directors, the Russo brothers, that, hey, why don't you make it so that's Black Widow that sacrifices herself, because in that whole role of after the 5 years of how everyone's coped with moving on, she was the only one trying to figure out the solution. Like, she was the only one still going and, trying to figure out how to get the stones back or whatever. And so they I guess they agreed with her, saying like, oh yeah, it would make sense that Black Widow is willing to die. She's willing to sacrifice herself to make things right. And so they went ahead and I guess they chose Black Widow instead of Hawkeye in this instance.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because me and KJ sort of spoke about this before the show, because I was expressing to him how I didn't like how there wasn't a non-resolution for Nat. And KJ was arguing the opposite. He was like, well, no, there was, because she had a lot of blood on her ledger. She didn't do a lot of nice things, and she was trying to make up for it, and she did it in the ultimate way. And I guess that rings true, and that is consistent with the character. But we were always told what she did wrong. We never saw it. Right. The Natasha that I saw in all of the films that she was in was a selfless person, a good person, somebody who fought alongside the Avengers, somebody who was a friend. And that's a Natasha that I saw, not the one who had blood on her ledger. So that
Right.
why, for me personally, I felt like, I was like, man, why'd you kill her off? Like I get why, but I just didn't
But
like
at the
the way she
same
went
time,
down.
she always speaks to the reason that she is doing what she's doing is because she has that blood on her hands. She's always spoke to that since the very first time she's introduced into the Marvel Universe. She's always spoke to the fact that she has all this blood on her hands, that she wasn't a good person, that she was this, assassin, and that she's always been trying to make
Rectify that.
retribution. Yeah, make retribution for that. And this was the ultimate way for her to make retribution, was to not only do it for all of the people that were pulled away in the snap, but just that reconciliation between her and Clint, because Clint is one of the people that pulled her out of that.
Yep.
So in that moment, her sacrificing herself over Clint was kind of her fulfilling that arc as well of righting the wrongs that she had done.
And I love the way that it all went down too, where they literally fight each other for the right to die. Like, I was like, man, that is so cool. They're fighting each other to die. I'm like, that's how committed they both are. They both are to the cause. So that,
and she's being held by him, right? And he can hold on. He can continue to hold on, but he can't get back up. He's just holding on. And she looks at him and she goes, "You have to let me go." She set it up to where he had no choice.
and in essence, and if you look at that scene again, like, he doesn't even really let go. She pushes off. She literally pushes off to let go, like, 'cause he won't let go. Oh man, just think back about that. That really touched me, man. Because I liked that character. I like Black Widow as a character. But one of the things that I think that they left open, because we know we're gonna get a Black Widow movie, right? And it's confirmed that it's a prequel, right? Because we're gonna get into it later. But Natasha doesn't come back, right? She can't come back. Hulk tried.
Technically, she can. Technically,
It's got to be
can't.
Well, it would have to be a Natasha of the past, which wouldn't be the same Natasha. Blah, blah,
Exactly.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. But they kept throughout the movies that she appears in, you hear the reference of Budapest, right? And I'm like, what is that? There's a story there. Please, this prequel Black Widow movie, please tell the story of Budapest. Yes.
Yeah, because they've been hitting on
especially in the
Budapest
first
since-
Avengers. In
since
the
the
first
very
Avengers,
first-
she's like, just like Budapest, right? And he's like,
Yeah.
you and I remember Budapest very differently.
That's right. That's a good callback, dude. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And then they referenced it on their way to the Soul Stone as well. They referenced Budapest again. So I just thought
Real quick.
that's good.
Real quick, we got a message from Jacob on the Discord saying, so after watching the new Avengers movie, I was excited and sad and disappointed. The movie, it was a good movie, but I hate Captain Marvel.
I didn't want to read that, but I saw it and I ignored it. Dave was gonna get a good kick out of that one.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Someone will respond to him, please. Somebody. Just come
So
I'll tell you this.
our heroes come back. They basically assemble.
Hold on. Remember, because War Machine and Nebula were still on their
That's
task.
right. You're right.
Yeah.
War Machine.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's a good one. I forgot. And I wrote that down. I literally wrote down Nebula and Rhodey go to one planet to collect the stone, and I put in question mark. Don't know the name of the planet. Which one is it?
Oh. All I know is that
might as
it
well
was when Peter Quill was trying to get that stone.
Isn't it like
And he's
Morgoth
dancing.
or something like
Morgoth,
that? It's
yeah.
the name of it. It's
I think
something
you're
like
right.
that.
I know that the one that Nat and Bert and Hawkeye go to. I know that one's called Vormir, but
Yeah.
I didn't get the other one.
But yeah, Quill's in there. He's dancing and singing, and you think you're part of the film in the background of the music, but it's just really him just destroying that song.
You know what I thought of? I thought of Infinity War when he tells Spider-Man, he's like, "Is Footloose still the best movie of all time?" And Peter nonchalantly says, "It never was."
Never was. He was so hurt. He's like, what?
Yeah, Peter Quill is one of the best characters that's come out of the Marvel universe, honestly, because I think he's just so genuine. You know?
Yeah, there's no phony in him. Yeah.
All of these other characters that are in the Marvel, there really is kind of an archetype that centers around that. But Peter Quill is just your average, goofball. You know what I mean? He's just
He's
your
like the
average
lead
guy.
of the group.
He really is. He's just so funny, and the things that come out of his mouth, you sometimes you just have to step back for a second and say,
Wow.
"Wow."
Of course you are. Of course you are.
It's funny because in the Infinity War, when you have all these alphas of the group of their smaller groups. So you have example Doctor Strange. He's the alpha. He's the solo guy. Then you have Tony Stark, who's one of the leaders for the Avengers. Or like the co-leader when Captain's not there. And then you have Peter Quill. And then you have these three alphas of the group arguing amongst each other, like, oh, who's in charge, or like who's in the. And there's that part. He's like, I like your plan, but we'll go with mine because mine's better.
That's right. He's the Justin. He is the Justin.
And how about we don't do your plan and we do my plan because it's better.
We're gonna get into it later, but I sort of got it, and I'll just preview it. I got a bone to pick with the way they handled Quill and his decision to basically hit Thanos that sort of screwed everything up. Like, I feel like he got scot-free, right? Like, we see what happens to Thor and how he screwed up, and we see the repercussions that he goes through. And granted, Quill is dead, but I feel when he comes back, like, there's no questioning of that character of, hey, dude, you screwed up. Why did you hit him? And I felt like that. I don't know. That was like, I know it's a nitpick, but for me, like, I remember because I had watched Infinity War on Thursday before watching it. So I was expecting when Quill comes back, maybe he'll be questioned about, hey, why did you do that, or they will reference it, and that never happened. So
he regrets nothing. He killed his girlfriend is what happened. He regrets absolutely nothing. You killed his girlfriend. He's gonna hit you back. And even later when they question what's the actor's name? Peter Quill's when they ask him, they're like, if you were in that situation, would you have hit him? He's like, oh, absolutely. No doubt about it, no questions asked. If you killed my wife, I'm going to hit you.
That's true. For sure.
I'm going to hit you. And there's no the thing is with Thor, even though the fate of the world is, it's not like he didn't mean to miss or anything. He generally went to kill and didn't get the kill. He went for the crit and didn't hit the crit. He got a body.
Yeah,
he got a body.
He missed. At the same time with Thor, I think the reason why Thor really falls into this Great Depression is it had been mounting from movies past.
Right.
Yeah, he literally had lost.
Yeah.
He had lost everything. This was it, man. And then when he goes and he messes that up, he literally stares death in the face, and it laughs at him. With that was just a taunting. And then he snaps and he takes everybody out. I mean, literally, that's where that comes from with Thor.
I'm the type
totally
of
different
person.
situation.
I'm the type of person that, like, when something, I can't think of an example, but like when something happens, I'll give you an example. I got jumped in 6th grade by, like, I don't know, these 4 kids. And I remember long after that, I would think and be like, man, if only I didn't say what I said, I wouldn't have got jumped. Right. And I could apply that to Thor and just thinking, man, if only I just chopped his head off, everything would have been okay. And I could just see him, like, replaying that in his mind over and over
again.
I'll
tell you something that, for me, one parallel that I have seen in this movie is in Infinity Wars and in Endgame is that, the Avengers are TMSG. We go into a raid and we frick it up every single time. We go in there with a plan. We're thinking we're gonna do this. We're gonna get in there, get out, no problems. Everything's gonna come out all dandy.
1 hour.
And
1 hour
no,
tops.
we all screw it up every single time. Justin is our Peter Quill. It's like every single thing he thinks is the alpha, he screws it up.
Hey, but
Gustavo
I pulled
is-
through in the end.
Well,
Sometimes.
so do we. So do we all. So do we all.
I love that by KJ. He's like, wait a minute. So do we too, right?
I say at the end of the day, if you want to relate this back to our little clan, I would say, yeah, sure, we're the Avengers. We do screw it up, but at the end of the day, you know what? Everybody has their part to play. Everybody has their strengths. Everybody has their weaknesses, and we all know what those are, and we play upon those to take it to whatever. And it's not just a raid in Destiny; it could be anything.
I'll tell you this.
It could be any of the games that we played together.
So I'll tell you this: our Budapest is Dying Light. We remember Dying Light very differently from one another. Okay. All right. So it's
I want to get back to the whole Nebula Thanos
and War Machine.
Yes.
I'll tell you what. For me, this is my opinion, and people are gonna be like, "No, it shouldn't have happened like that." For my opinion, Nebula should have stayed in the future. She should have just given the coordinates to War Machine, and we wouldn't have had Thanos screw it up at the end. That's my big take.
But War
Nobody would've
Machine
known
didn't
that.
know how to get to the stone anyway. He couldn't have gotten it to it without Nebula. She needed her arm to be able to get through there anyway.
Right.
And then on top of that, the other thing is just a quick callback in that scene, which I thought was really cool, was the whole callback to Indiana Jones,
Yeah.
Right.
where they
right.
opened it. It's like, you're going into the Temple of the Power Stone. You're just going to walk right in there. Don't you know that a rock's going to, spheres are going to come out or something?
What are you talking about? It's like,
Just thought that was so cool. But I mean, I see what you're saying, Marlon, but at the same time, you got to remember it was Nebula who was able to reach through
Right.
to grab.
you can make the
power.
argument that War Machine could have just taken out the suit and go,
And she was the one who located Thanos to begin with. But that scene is important because that scene basically leads us to the third third act of the movie, right? So where you have our Avengers, they come back home, right? Hulk is he's just crushed. That I love that scene when he comes back in and you see Clint, he drops to his knees and it's just a very curt and simple, Clint, where's Nat? Oh man, and you just see Thor. You see Hulk and he's like. He's breathing a little heavy, and he's just looking, and then he just goes down, and it's just a very simple thud. And man, that hit that's another one that cut deep. I love that scene.
So I'm gonna bring it back just a smidge. So at the very very beginning when they kill Thanos the first time, he mentions that he is the inevitable. That it's a very powerful message, and like Nebula says, he's not a liar. And when in that scene with War Machine and Nebula, when they when their frequencies cross or whatever it was for her to see what she was seeing or whatever. What my nitpick about this film was that in the Infinity War, Thanos was built up to this higher being that he did his research on some of these people in the background, like he knows their powers going into this fight. Like, oh man, like I can fight them or whatever. He knows Iron Man, he knows all this stuff. But this Thanos in the past, he's like learning all this stuff, pretty much replaying whatever Nebula saw from their timeline, and he's just doing a quick catch up. But it's not the Thanos that they fought in the first one. It's the prior Thanos,
And he's a little less mature. And
exactly.
This Thanos is actually.
It's probably what leads to his downfall too.
Well, other than the fact that the Thanos of the comics was actually courting death, and he was going for the Infinity Stones in order to court death, right? This Thanos in this movie is actually very much more like the Thanos of the comics.
yeah.
Right.
More
The
ruthless.
personality, at least, where he just really is just there to wipe things out. And I thought that it was very telling when he stands there and says, I'm gonna, I'm going to enjoy this. He basically,
I want to table that. I want to table that discussion. I want to table that.
all right.
That's something that I really really want to touch on later on. Oh man, that pisses me off. Dude, you have no idea. The whole Nebula
That's
thing.
only because you're in love with the Thanos of the Infinity.
Yeah, I know. I don't know
I am.
why.
I am. We're gonna. I'm sorry, Kate.
It's a major infatuation.
We're gonna put something on our Twitter
He
later.
has a man crush.
I'm gonna
on
put
all
something
Thanos.
there. If I have to do it myself, Thanos is a bad person. Yes or no? Boom.
All right, well, we're gonna get to that later. So our heroes come back. They, basically make the Infinity Gauntlet again.
That's right.
Hulk basically brings everybody back, hurting himself in the process. Later on, we find out that he tried to bring Nat back, and he couldn't. And that also was like, man, he tried. Like, that's why he was like, oh, trying to snap these fingers, burning my arm. And it just didn't work. But another thing that I didn't like about this movie was how, we know that past Nebula helps Thanos come into the future, into this reality. But when he attacks from above in his like Star Destroyer, like the first person you see that gets hit is Ant-Man, and I know that he shrunk, but one thing that bothered me, like, again, it's nitpicky, but it's just about being consistent with certain things. Like nobody died, like nobody was even like really hurt. Like I'm like, wow, you just leveled this whole, Avengers Tower. But see that's the type of suspension of disbelief that I don't like. That's lazy to me. Like, why didn't somebody get hurt? Why didn't somebody die?
Gustavo, I'm gonna cut you off right there. You know why? Because Justin was manning the controllers of that ship. Okay.
That's good.
Okay. He was using Warcliffe coil, and he missed all his shot. Okay. He missed him. That's basically what happened. He Justin was manning the turret and he missed. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say.
I mean, I thought that scene was all right. I think you're looking too much into that scene that no one died. I'm sorry, Goose, no one died. They're the Avengers, for crying out loud. You
No one
know,
got
kill them
hurt.
with a snap, or with throwing them off the cliff at the Soul Stone.
I just thought like somebody could have been hurt. Like one of the humans in terms of Rhodey or Hawkeye. Could have lost a limb. Like, somebody needed to get. I felt like somebody needed to get hurt there.
Hulk was already hurt. There you go. I'll give you that.
I don't.
Actually at the that scene there is actually a callback to an old comic book cover where Hulk was holding up everything, and then it had all the Avengers in the comic book cover. Hulk is holding up, I don't know if it's like the world or something, but he's got basically everything on his shoulders, and then everybody else is below him. So that was actually a callback in itself, with Hulk underground holding the structure up. I thought that was pretty cool to see, that Hawkeye is the one who ends up with the gauntlet, and then
he's being chased by these demons.
Dude, he was like,
that chase scene was cool.
He was full on Legolas in that scene there, man, where he's just shooting the arrows left and right. He's flipping, he's spinning up. I mean, that was just.
I felt like there was a little alien callback. The first Alien, when he knows exactly. Go ahead,
not Alien, aliens. When they shoot the flare and then the walls are all moving around, like, oh man, I was like, yes.
I love
it was so good.
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
I know you don't.
God, Justin, you're something.
There's movies that I don't watch, and then there's horror movies I don't ever even think or fathom or whatever about what.
That was on the spot, dude. That was so good.
That was, man. Like, it's some of the references in this movie, calling back on older movies that we used to see as kids, man. I'll tell you that it was a fresh air for me, because like Kay just said, a lot of this, producers and movie companies, they don't like referencing other pop culture hits. They want to keep it concise. They want to keep it within their own little universe, stuff. And for me, seeing all that, like the alien call outs, it's the Big Lebowski for me. Like that scene for me was like the best. It's just. But
Justin brought up earlier Ready Player One, and I feel like Ready Player One. You know, I said that earlier in the show where, you know, it's always been kind of taboo. But I think like when Ready Player One literally became a movie of callbacks, I think that almost kind of broke the mold in movies. It almost kind of gave everybody permission to do it.
Actually,
Especially by
I'm
somebody
gonna
as big as
argue with
Spielberg.
you on that. I think it was actually Wreck-It Ralph that probably did it with all the
Yeah, that was within video games, though.
games.
That
But
wasn't in pop
I
culture as a whole.
but I think that's basically what tell people, hey, you know what? There might be some into this, you know. But
Yeah.
going back into like the whole Avengers, getting
The
headquarters
final
blown up.
battle, yeah, like that leads up to the final battle. I mean, you see one of the things that I really liked. You see the three core Avengers, like these whole 22 movies. Although they have their offshoots and they have their Black Panthers, and they have their Ant-Mans, the three pillars were Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, and you see all of them come together. And one of the things that I loved was when Thor summoned both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, and he gets his armor and he stays fat. Boy, did oh man, I love that because I know that they were like, I know how I am as a fan, and like if one of my favorite characters or a character that I really like, if something is off about him, sooner or later I know that in the film or in the movie or in the comic book or in the video game, they're going to fix it. He will be back to normal. And the Russo said, no, he's not. He can still beat butt and take names being a big Lebowski Thor.
Yep.
And oh man, when that's cemented, like I remember again, just looking at my notes, I wrote, it was like a stream of consciousness. I wrote down, Thor gets his armor, stays fat, loved it.
And I'll tell you what, something that I really like about this movie is that we finally see Thor, because through the entire MC universe, we always been seeing that they wanted to make Thor like the next Odin, you know, like the next king. And he's never been that. You know, you from the beginning you could tell that that's not what he wants to
He's
do.
a goofball.
He's
He
a
really
goofball. He just loves, you know, being a marauding, you know, ranger and stuff like that just goes from planet to planet, just having a jolly old time. You know, that's what he loves to do. And in the first movie, you could tell like he just loves battles and drinking, and that's what Thor has always wanted to be. And he's always had this issue of, oh no, I have to grow up. I have to take up the mantle of my father, you know, become, you know, the next king of the Asgardians. And the fact that for me, that after, and this is just a little bit going forward, but when he gave Valkyrie the mantle, say, hey, no, you should be the next queen of Asgardian, because you are a leader. I'm not a leader. I know this. I have realized this. I finally come to terms with what I want to do and what I can do and what I cannot do, you know. And for me, that's like we could tell that this guy has had the most growth out of maybe on par with Captain America. And Tony had growth, but Tony knew what he wanted to be, you know. He just needed to get there. Thor, he just realized, hey, I don't have to be a king. I don't have to be like the leader. I can just be the goofball, like Justin over here. But
I'll just try to get to it. Like, what did you guys think of that last battle and like how everything unfolded with basically, you know, the people who had passed away? You know, we had Wakandans, we had sorcerers, you know, from Doctor Strange, we had
Sailor Moon,
we had the Avengers. They all came back, and I love that scene between Cap and Thanos, right? And that metaphor, I saw that as a metaphor where we see that like his forearm is basically, he has this huge gash in his forearm, and I took that as, hey, listen, things are broken. And as soon as he uses his shield as a tourniquet, that was so awesome. He just straps it on and closes that wound. And that was like, again, it was just like a metaphor, like, no, things are fixed now. We are going to fix this broken chasm. We're going to close it. Like, I love that scene. That was so, I don't know, that was so amazing.
So
as a
you
big
got to
fan of Captain
remember,
America.
You got to remember how I mentioned earlier the key scene in the beginning of the movie with Captain doing um, the whole therapy
Small
group
group. Yeah,
session.
the small group
Yeah,
session. Yeah.
his support group session. That there's that scene when the three pillars are fighting Thanos before Doctor Strange and everybody comes in. That they're getting their butt kicked,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this surprising moment where in my theater everybody was cheering when all of a sudden, where Mjolnir comes and hits Thanos, and you're wondering
Who?
where the hammer, the hammer, the
Meow
hammer.
meow.
Meow meow.
Mjolnir.
Mjolnir.
Mjolnir,
Mjolnir.
okay?
I had like
I'm
saliva.
sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm
The
sorry.
foreign
So
guy
anyway,
knows how to
so he
say
hits
it,
him-
okay?
He hits him with the hammer, and then all of a sudden you're wondering who hit him with the hammer, and then it goes to none other than who Captain America grabs the hammer.
I
Can we,
knew
be
it.
honest, can we be honest that we all called that? I knew it was Captain America as soon as they
course.
swung it. Can we? Like, I remember when it happened. The first thing I did was I looked because they show a shot of Thor, and I'm trying to see his hands. I'm like, did he call for it? I'm like, okay, he did it. I'm like, yeah, that's Cap. Like
Oh,
that
yeah.
was so obvious.
But that was within like a second, a span of a second.
And
So
there's a theory
But-
that Captain knew he could pick up the hammer from the get-go.
there
and-
is there
and-
is a
and he-
theory-
Yeah, I think KJ called. I think KJ
Yeah,
called.
in,
that.
I
the,
think-
in the Marvel comics, in the original Marvel comics, everyone knew that Captain could pick up the hammer. He was capable of picking up the hammer.
He's lifted it up 4 times in canon Marvel comics. before.
Correct. But in this one, what made him pick up that hammer was that therapy group session. Because if you recall back in Age of Ultron, that he tried to pick up the hammer and it looks like he budged a little bit, and you see the look of Thor's face, like, oh man, this guy almost moved.
He's gonna show me up here.
Yeah, he's about to become Thor. They said that in order for him to pick up that hammer was because of that therapy group session that he had in the beginning. He was able to finally admit that he had some regret coming to this time that he didn't get to live out his days with Peggy back in the day, and that's what gave him the power to finally pick up that hammer and be able to use it and wield it. He finally got it off his chest. That he
I
was
think
whooping.
there's different theories. Like the way I put it on the Discord, like the reason that people can't pick it up is literally a spell. It's an enchantment on the hammer that precludes anybody who Odin deems not to be worthy from picking it up. And what does Odin believe to be worthy? Somebody who is selfless, which
Right.
is what he was trying to teach his son in order for him to pick up that hammer that he loves so much. And
But
that's
Captain's
what.
always been selfless. He's always been selfless.
But
So
in this
what-
but in this particular instance, when he faced Thanos by himself, because remember you said it yourself, Strange hadn't come through and opened up the gates to bring everybody, right? So Cap had no idea that to his left, right? That was I love that moment. That to his left,
On your left.
on your left. He had no idea that he was going to have backup, and he just stood up. He used his shield as a tourniquet, right? And he stared back at Thanos, and he said, "We're right. I never, he didn't say that, but just the attitude of I don't give up." And that's when I think that he became worthy, because he was, if Strange didn't come out with the army, they were gonna die, dude. And Captain America knew that going in, but he knew he was gonna die fighting. And to me personally, that's my theory. I think that's when he really became worthy. When he knew that even though he was gonna die, like that was the ultimate self-sacrifice, ultimate act of being selfless.
I think that Cap was always able to pick up Mjolnir. I think that he could have picked it up before, and he didn't. And I think it was one of those things where he didn't want to show Thor up. And Thor knew it too, because when Cap gets the hammer, what is the first thing Thor says? Thor goes, "I knew it."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right?
yeah, he does say that.
He knew it all along that Cap could hold that hammer and didn't. And then what I think was one of my favorite parts about that scene is that if you remember when the very first time, I think it was Tony, Thor, and Cap, and they're all kind of fighting each other.
Oh, in Avengers 1.
Avengers 1, right?
Yes.
And then Cap comes down.
Thor
Thor comes down with the hammer, and Cap puts up the shield, and they hit, and like everything just like levels for forever. Well, what does Cap do? He throws his shield and then throws the hammer and hits the shield with the hammer, and it just sends shockwaves through Thanos, and he doesn't even know what to do. It totally stuns him for a second. I just thought that was so awesome. I mean, that was one of the highlights of that fight scene.
It really was.
Yeah.
I think another reason why, also bringing it back to the Thor thing, is that they made him fat was because they had to nerf him a little bit. Because if you think about it, him fighting Thanos one on one, he was already strong as it was. So making him fat and slow and kind of like, I mean, he was still strong and powerful. Don't get me wrong, but I think they had to level the playing field a little bit. Because think about it, Thanos without the gauntlet.
I can see that a little bit. Like I watched again. I watched Infinity War on Thursday, and I just rewatched it before doing this show. And when he comes into Wakanda after he creates Stormbreaker, like he is just like taking everybody out. Like he's the one that evens the playing field when he comes back. Yeah. So I could see that. I could totally. See that.
I'll tell you something about Stormbreaker. When the whole war starts out and they start fighting each other and all hell breaks loose. The fact that when Captain America gives the Mjolnir back to Thor, he's like, "Nah, give me my axe back, okay?"
Oh yeah, there's that moment where they traded for like a moment. He's like,
"Oh
yeah,"
he goes, "You take the little one."
Yeah,
that's a big one. This is mine.
You take the little one. That was great.
There's another scene.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was like going back to that whole Doctor Strange thing, and they sit on your left, and they're coming in slowly. I thought that was, he called in it. Thor. Thanos calls in his army, and I'm like, there's no way. And then of course, then the big Doctor Strange rings, teleportation rings start coming out like all one by one, and you're like, oh, okay.
There's actually something really cool in that scene, and you probably don't realize it. I only know of it because I was watching one of these YouTube channel guys where they had done a bunch of freeze frames of the people coming through the tunnels. Mm-hmm. And it's literally every single character just about that has been in every single Marvel movie that's
Correct.
Coming through there. And one of the coolest thing is that out of one of those rings walks Howard the Duck with a giant gun. And I just was like,
I didn't see that.
So
I didn't see that.
cool.
I didn't
They
see
brought
that.
Howard the Duck to the fight, man.
Wow.
Wow, I didn't see that. I'll have to.
And if you look at it again, when you guys go back and see it again, I'm telling you, Howard the Duck comes right through one of the portals. He's in the background. He's kind of like kind of left center in the shot, and he's got this giant gun. And I was just like, that is so awesome. Like they literally brought everybody back for this fight, though. That was just so cool that they had all these different characters involved in this at the end. And one of the things that I did not like about that scene is that they brought back all of the Asgardians, but the Asgardians were not killed by the snap.
Yeah, I am glad that you brought that up because I'm so happy you brought that up.
The Asgardians back. They were not killed by the snap. They were killed before the snap.
They're in Ragnarok.
So that was the one thing in this. Honestly, that is the one thing in this whole movie that didn't sit well with me. I could really kind of personally just kind of justify everything else. But that was the one thing that just kind of threw me off a little bit is that they had the Asgardians come back in that scene and they shouldn't have been there. And honestly, it was a throwaway. They didn't need them there.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would have known the difference,
Right?
Had they not been there.
I mean, I guess you could make an argument that. See, the problem was the volume. I'm totally with you. The problem for me was the volume of Asgardians that came in through that portal, because I'm like, man, that's way more Asgardians than survive at the end of Ragnarok. Mm-hmm. And I know it's like super nerdy and super nitpicky, but it just you're right. It just didn't sit right with me at all, because I saw them come and I'm like, oh man, that's too many of them. Like, not that many survive. There's like a small colony somewhere in like Sweden or something, right? It's called New Asgard. No, I'm sorry. And then there's another scene that I really want to call to that I personally loved, but I felt that it was done incorrectly. It really felt like I'm not going to say the term, but it really felt like hey, look at what we're doing. We love girls.
Oh, I know what you said. Yep.
Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon.
I loved it. I loved it for the fact that, again, it tugged at the heartstrings, because I'm like, man, Nat needed to be there. Right? Again, it's like I wanted Natasha to be there. And it was a cool scene because I love, especially because of Rescue. Like, I again, you guys know that I didn't grow up reading Marvel comics. I started reading it later on in life, but I did read Matt Fraction's complete Iron Man run. And Matt Fraction came into Iron Man when Iron Man was a big thing in the theaters back in '08. You know, he started writing that character around that time, and he really co-opted a lot of the things that Robert Downey Jr. did, and the movies also co-opted some of the stuff that Matt Fraction did. So at the beginning of the movie, when we see Morgan Stark with the rescue helmet, that it's just such a distinct visual style, I knew automatically. I'm like, oh my god, that's the rescue helmet. And then at the end, we see Pepper Potts in the rescue armor. That was just such a big payoff for me. Again, just like the nerdiness of, hey, I read this in the comic book and now I'm seeing it on the screen. That was such a cool moment. But I just felt like it was done lazily. It really felt like hey, we got to check this box. And that was the only part of the movie that I felt that it rubbed me the wrong way.
They got to satisfy a part of the the people that are watching that movie too. So
I didn't have a problem with the scene itself, with the exception of the fact that all of those people just moments before were spread out all over that battlefield. That's what bothered me. You know, even if they had done that as the Avengers as a whole, because that always bothered me. It bothered me back in one of the other Avengers movies. Like, everybody was spread out over the whole battlefield. You see them just moments before, they're in 10 different places. And then all of a sudden, everybody comes together and kind of assembles right in the center. And it was like this almost like female Avengers assemble moment, which, okay, that's great. I'm glad that they had their female Avengers assemble moment. But literally, they were spread out over the battlefield. And then all of a sudden, all of these people, half of which are just straight up like regular people, humans, they don't have suits on or anything else. Like, they just all of a sudden, like, were somehow able to get from like a quarter of a mile away to that exact point where all the ladies just happened to be at the same time.
Yeah,
that was the only part.
I'll be honest. In a vacuum, who cares? But just, and I'm not gonna bring politics into it, but just in the zeitgeist that we're in, it really just felt like hey, look at what we're doing, and I'm like, why? You know?
Well, then I was gonna bring it to the Black Lives Matter. They should probably get their own scene in there too.
Okay, I think that was Wakanda. So the thing for me is the I get it, I understand, because of the way just the whole issue came about, but I felt that for the final battle, Captain Marvel, who probably had the strongest superpowers in the entire female cast, at least
not just amongst the female cast, like the whole cast.
She was supposed to be the whole cast. She was supposed to be the most
powerful. She could take she's literally Thor from Infinity War. She could take everything out. It's just like, yeah, I'm gonna play tag with this gauntlet. I'm gonna just take it there. I'm like, just use the goddamn thing, You already have it.
No. Listen, I'll be honest.
Trying to destroy it is what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I haven't seen Captain Marvel, independent of the SJW Brie Larson stuff. I haven't seen Captain Marvel, but there was one scene in the movie where I was like, oh wow, she's like a bad character in terms of how good she is, because
she's a badass.
The Rain of Fire.
No, yeah, because you have like these Star Destroyers and they're just like raining fire on the ground. And then I love that scene because all of a sudden they just stop entirely, completely, just stop firing at the ground.
Exactly.
And they all aim at the sky. And I'm like, oh, what's coming? This is bad. And it's Captain Marvel.
It's just like yeah. It's like
I could just imagine like the commanders of those ships saying, "Captain Marvel, focus fire, focus fire, focus fire."
Well, they're saying that the second most powerful character behind Captain Marvel is Scarlet Witch because of her powers. There's that scene where she's pretty much ripping Thanos apart, and she's like, like, this is for what you did to Vision and for what you did 5 years and blah blah blah, all this stuff. And then you could see that struggle where he's about to die. Like, he knows that was his final moment. Like, oh, no, and he's like, Rain of Fire. And they're like, oh, well, what about the troops? He's like, Rain of Fire. And then they start bringing it down.
Well, Scarlet Witch has always been one of the most powerful characters. And the reason why is because she's born of the Infinity Stones in the MCU. It's not.
Wait,
She's not the same Scarlet. She's not the same. Not
Yeah, she's not
necessarily
a
the
mute.
same Scarlet Witch as the Scarlet Witch from the comics.
okay,
Yeah.
thank
Okay,
you.
because
Thanks.
the
'Cause I'm like,
Scarlet.
wait a minute.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Scarlet Witch of
because
the comics.
those two are Magneto's children in the comics.
Exactly. Yeah.
So here
but
they're just like experiments gone wrong
yeah,
or
they
gone
were
right.
experiments using the Infinity Stones on people.
They were
the MCU.
miracles.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. They were called miracles because they couldn't be called mutants pre Disney buying Fox. That's right. I
Yep.
forgot about that.
Miracles.
Yeah.
Dude,
So,
when I saw that,
yeah,
I thought like,
and
oh
then-
god.
But just real quick before we touch on what we're been circling around here for a while. I kind of dislike the way they use Captain Marvel. I said it in the chat. I said they just like, because I think that had she not been there, they would have just died because of all the fire raining upon them by the Star Destroyer. I'm going to call them Star Destroyers. But she was just literally like a god in the machine. Like I said, Deus Ex Machina. She comes in, plot device, just destroys the ship, and that's it.
Well,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, that sort of felt lazy to me, like the way they used her. I don't know.
She's
Maybe
the
I'm
most
wrong.
OP character. I mean, if you had her more involved, then you didn't need her. You remember in the very beginning of the movie, I know Thanos was already weak and he pretty much had no will to live anymore after that because he just destroyed the stones. You know, he didn't fight back in the beginning of the movie, but you saw how powerful she was. She single-handedly took Thanos down.
I loved when he headbutted her and nothing.
Yeah, and she takes it.
She just
and
took
that's
it
the
and just
thing,
stared at
because
him.
she's the most, and in the Marvel comics, he uses the whole gauntlet on her, and her power is to literally just absorb energy and distribute it back, or however she wants to use it, or take in that power.
Mhm.
So and there's a surprising moment where him and her are fighting, and he has the gauntlet on when he's about to like close his fist, and he goes out of the struggle between those two. He pulls the power stone out of the gauntlet and decks her, and it just uses that full force of just that one stone, and boom, just catches her by surprise.
But that was a great stroke of like masterful, like Thanos in his prime, even though it's still like immature and not as seasoned Thanos. Yeah,
Right.
because he, and I found there was a little bit of dissonance because I'm like, well, that's not the Thanos that we know. That's a Thanos of another timeline. So again, it's just nerdy and nitpicky. But I was like, how did he do that if he doesn't have a mastery of the stones yet? But he's acting like the Thanos who's dead. I like that scene, but I don't know. Again, it's just
remember, he's inevitable is what he is. So it was gonna happen. He's there to.
But
kick
now
ass and take names.
let's touch on the finale. What happens with Tony? And how that entire thing wraps up. Like how did you guys feel about that entire section between Thanos and Tony, and how basically all of this was called in Infinity War?
It was a major callback when Tony grabbed the stones, and then Thanos tried doing the snap, and he failed because he's like, "What happened to the stones?" And then Tony had it around his arm. Because remember, there's that moment before where Iron Man sees Doctor Strange on the battlefield, and he says like, "Oh, he's like, is this the moment?" And he says, "If I tell you, it's not going to happen." In that settled moment, Iron Man knew what he had to do. That it was his time to do what he needed to do. So
especially when Doctor Strange like pointed the finger like the one, I was like, oh man, this is really gonna happen.
Yeah, and he got the stones, and in that one final callback, he says, Thanos says, "I am inevitable," and then Iron Man says, "I am Iron Man." Snap, and that was pretty much it. And I was like, oh wow, that moment gave me goosebumps.
And immediately following that was probably my favorite scene of the whole movie, which is the exact opposite scene from the movie before, where you had Peter Parker fading away and Iron Man standing over the top of him. And in this scene, you have Iron Man mentally fading away and Peter Parker standing over the top of him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, again, brought back our whole daddy issues and our father-son callback in this movie all over again, where Tony makes the ultimate sacrifice, being the father figure role, and then the son character comes in to see that the father has placed that sacrifice upon himself right there at the end. I just thought that was absolutely amazing. I loved every moment of that, and I thought it was one of the best scenes, and the best way to put it together at the end was that way of doing it. I thought
he was gonna make it. I thought he was gonna make it.
No, I knew he was gone.
Yeah.
As soon as the whole thing about, if as soon as Strange said, if I tell you it won't happen, that sealed the deal. I'm like, man, Tony's gonna die, because I went in thinking that Cap was gonna die. Right, I went in thinking I've always felt that, and we're gonna get into it in a little bit, but I always felt that Captain America was literally a man out of time. And not only was he living that, but he literally felt that. I'm like, yeah, I think Cap is gonna die. But when Strange said that to Tony, and Tony gave him that look, there was an understanding, right? Tony knew, and so did Strange. And I'm like, man, Tony's gone. But going back to what KJ said about the scene between him and Peter, believe it or not, I like the one after with Pepper. That scene was, I didn't cry, and Tony dying didn't really hit me until I watched it on bootleg the second time. But the scene between
you bastard.
But the scene between him and Pepper, man, it was subtle, it was nuanced. She came in trying to be, not trying to be, just being his wife. Like, she held Peter. She moved him to the side. She said, "Hey, listen, it's gonna be okay." She goes over to her husband and she says, you can rest now. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Trying to soothe him, trying to soothe herself, trying to soothe the people behind her who are witnessing what's happening to Tony. Just a very motherly like figure. And the Friday AI, right? Just the contact, the very little conversation, right? She acknowledges Friday with a very intonated Friday. And the AI already knows what it is that she's asking. And to Pepper, the AI says, "Life science critical." Man, I'm getting choked up about that. that got me really good, man. When it says life science critical, and then you just see Tony just wither away, and then that's when she breaks down, right? Because she is holding point. She is that rock where she's like, "I'm not gonna break down." But then when Tony passes away, she just loses it. And I thought that was done masterfully. My voice is cracking because it just bringing me back to that moment. It was such a strong moment for me personally. Man, that's
the MCU is so full of strong female characters. And that's one of the things that I really like about the MCU is that it really doesn't distinguish between male and female characters as to who, you got all these strong personalities, these strong people, right? And Pepper Potts is just one of those, man. Like, she starts off and they almost play her up like a secretary type role at the very beginning, but then she just kind of even in that role, she's taken charge in those first few Iron Man movies. And as it continues to move on, man, she goes and she's the CEO of, Stark Industries and everything else. And then she has Extremis, and I mean, what a powerful character she was, and how powerful a character did she have to be to tell Tony in those moments when he comes to her, and how selfless is she, and tells him to go and do this mission, knowing that the ultimate consequence is the most likely outcome of this. I mean, you got to think, the last time they faced Thanos, it didn't go well.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't have much of a chance to begin with for this to go right. I mean, what did Doctor Strange says? 1 in 14 million something.
Yeah.
Right? For this to go right. And they know those odds going into this. Tony knows those odds. Guarantee you Pepper knows those odds too. And she tells him, it's the only way you're going to be able to rest. Go and do it, And it just, what a strong character she is. It's absolutely amazing.
I'll cut into the next scene, where they're all, the funeral scene where they're passing on, again, another callback to the first Iron Man, that Tony Stark does have a heart. His first making of the what is it?
Iron Man suit, yeah.
Repulsor tech, yeah.
Yeah, and they let it float down the water, and you see all the characters that were there in the battle, and then there's like a random kid that's in there, but I think I'll get back to that in a moment. You see Nick Fury, You see Captain Marvel. Everybody's there, and then again, like I said, that one kid. You're like, I wondered. I was like, who's that kid? Who's that kid?
Yeah,
But,
I didn't recognize him, to be honest. I did not recognize him at
I
all.
knew exactly who he was.
So yeah, so since I guess I'll let KJ take it, but I think it's in reference of the Iron Man 3.
It is, yeah.
It's
And
a
it's
little
the same
boy from
actor,
Iron
too.
Man 3. Yeah.
Yeah, that
He
the
came
show
back
that
for
time
this
has passed, that he has grown.
Yeah.
So,
But yet another callback to the whole father son, because that was a very father son type
Right.
movie between Tony and that kid. And again, here's another boy that Tony was a father figure to him that comes back to have that moment at the end, which I thought was great.
and just like father and daughter, you have Happy there, his chauffeur, his butler, also the director for the first Iron Man movie. He's talking to his to Tony's daughter, and he's like, what do you want? Like are you hungry? And then she says, yeah. And then he's like, what do you want to eat? And she's like, a cheeseburger. And he's like, I'll get you a cheeseburger. And he's like, your dad loves cheeseburgers. And that's another callback to the first Iron Man movie, because after he escapes from that
Afghanistan.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He flies in and he's like, I want two things. First thing, I want you to hold a press conference. And number two, I want an American cheeseburger. That's the
Love that.
And going back to what KJ said about Tony being a father figure, watching it the second time again on bootleg, yeah, it struck me a little, on that repeated viewing, it really gave me like an overview of that character, and it sort of made me even more sad when watching the Morgan scene with Happy, because I'm like, man, Iron Man, Tony was able to be a father figure to that kid in Iron Man 3. He was able to be a father figure to, Peter Parker, but he's not going to be able to be there for his daughter. And that touched hard, watching it again last night. It was like, man, that one's tough. That one's real tough.
I guarantee you that he's got video logs set up for her.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm pretty
Most
sure
likely,
too,
yeah.
He had that whole, if you're watching this, I'm dead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he's probably got a whole slew of those things already built up for her someplace. I bet you, and I think that in future movies there will be a video logged Tony, or there will be a and we'll get into this scene in a second, a Captain America that comes back and gives a little bit of a words of wisdom or something, or maybe does a little cameo. I think
I was going to say, can we talk about?
Maybe they'll replace the Stan Lee cameos with a
Tony,
a Tony cameo, or a Cap cameo in the future. So let's get into the next one here with Captain America, as he gets his small send off. He goes
Exactly.
He's got, which I want to bring this up. I'm going to bring this up right now, because I have never seen anybody say anything about this. When Cap leaves with the stones, and he's going to go back in time, and he's going to drop everything back off where they found it. He takes the hammer now. So he goes away, and then a few seconds later, he doesn't come back like he's supposed to. And then we find him on the bench as an old man. He hands off the shield. He doesn't have the hammer with him.
I think he put the hammer back.
He had to.
Of course.
But
there's a reason for it.
Right, of course. The timeline needs to continue. Can we all say that he was allowed to have that selfish act? That he was allowed to have a do-over that nobody else was able to do?
Absolutely.
It's a selfish act. It was absolutely selfish of him to do that.
But he earned it, because out of every single character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was the only one who was 100% selfless. And growing up, I wasn't a Captain America guy. I thought he was like a Superman character in terms of a Boy Scout. Like, I really couldn't get into him. But he is my favorite character of the MCU, and I loved that he got his due. I love that they called back the first Avenger when he tells Peggy, "I owe you a dance," and when I saw them dancing, I was like in the theater, I was like, he got his dance. He paid her back. I was so hyped over that. I'm like, he owed her a dance and he got the dance. The only thing that I started thinking about, and I also started reading into it, was like the whole timeline thing, and I wish I had it, because they speculate that he went back into a different timeline and
Right.
had his
He's in a
life with
different.
Peggy. Yeah, and had his life with Peggy,
Yeah.
and then after Peggy died, then he comes back to the current timeline.
Right.
It's that's the scene
It's
that
absolutely
got me.
selfish of him. Absolutely.
That's the
But
scene that got me. Okay, that's the scene where when I saw Captain America dancing with Peggy, that's what got me. Because again, I'm drawing the parallel with me and my girlfriend. I'm thinking, damn it, he finally got what he's due. He finally got it. And for me, I was like, maybe I'll get it one day. That was the part where I felt the best for Captain America, but I felt like my heart was like, man, come on, man.
I love that they showed the ring.
Yeah, man.
And now I'm gonna skip 2 seconds later. How do you guys feel about Sam Wilson becoming Captain America?
I'm okay with
I
it.
dig it. I thought it was gonna be Winter Soldier that gets it.
I'm whatever. I'm not even gonna say.
there was a
it.
nod there. There was a nod. So in the comics, Winter Soldier actually becomes Captain America before Falcon ever becomes Captain America.
Exactly.
And if you noticed, Anthony Mackie's character looks back at Bucky, and Bucky passes it. He passes on it. He gives him the nod. He gives him the okay to take it, because and I think that was really good. There's one other small callback I want to bring up before we get away from it too far. Agent Carter, the TV show. I was a fan. I watched every single episode of that, and I really liked that show because I really do like that character of Agent Carter. And throughout that whole series, she had a husband, but her husband was a mystery throughout the whole series.
Nice.
So I think that was really cool. That maybe, just maybe, that this was already
Pre-planned.
written well in advance, and when they did that Agent Carter series, that's the reason the husband was always a mystery.
I see.
So I think that was
well
kind of
done.
neat.
Yeah, man, you got me want to get into that. That makes perfect sense, because in that timeline, Captain America would just want to live his life and be with Peggy, right? He wouldn't want to be Captain America.
No,
He would lay low while she. That's right. He would lay low while she would be the hero. That's awesome. I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that. I had no idea.
Yeah. But bringing it back to Anthony Mackie taking the mantle, I think that's going to be really cool, and it's going to be a different way of looking at Captain America, because the
He probably
Falcon
has a better ass than Captain America.
the Falcon Captain America is going to be a much different Captain America than the Steve Rogers Captain America, because one, he's not a super soldier. He's augmented through the flight suit and everything else. So just starting off, I mean, yeah, he bleeds red, white, and blue, and that's awesome. But it's definitely going to be a different character, a different way of doing business with Falcon as Captain America. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with that.
I am as well. It sort of rubbed me the wrong way. Only, and again, this is just a nerdy comic book guy. I mean, I did read the death of Captain America, so I just felt like it was Bucky's, like he was the heir to the throne.
Yeah.
But I do like the way that KJ put it, because I didn't see it that way. Again, it's all about interpretation, and I'm open to different ones. And I like, please stop typing, whoever's typing. But I also like the way that KJ put it in terms of, hey, Bucky let him have it, right? Bucky gave him the go ahead to take it. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they did a proper send off. I feel like they did a proper send off with a little bit of everybody. And instead of doing the end credit scenes, they really kind of, these little scenes here, with the one with Cap, the one with Thor, as we go on here, these were kind of the scenes that had to happen in lieu of the post-credit scenes, because we didn't have post-credit scenes on this one. And I think that was kind of cool, is that these were kind of those little wrap-ups and setups for the next set of movies. So I look forward to a American Falcon, I look forward to Asgardians of the Galaxy, which was the next scene that came up, which actually is a callback to a comic book called Asgardians of the Galaxy, which is very interesting, was actually written, the comic book, the Asgardians of the Galaxy, was actually written during the time that they were filming this movie. So it's kind of one of those things you don't know what came from what. What's the chicken, right? What's the egg on this one? Was it Asgardians of the Galaxy, the comic book, that brought this scene together, or was it this scene that actually brought Asgardians of the Galaxy comic book into existence? So I think that's kind of neat as well. And then you have the whole Peter Quill versus Thor, which is a like callback.
Alpha male versus beta male, if you ask me. But it's like,
so yeah, one of the things, now that we've basically broken down the movie, one of the things that I really wanted to get, and I'm gonna try to take all these two of these topics and roll them into one. And I what were some of your favorite characters, right? In terms of their arcs that stood out for you, and then also what did you like and didn't like about the movie? So I'm gonna start it off, and I'm gonna focus on. I really wanted to talk about Cap and Thor, and I'll get to those later. But there's one character in particular that I want to talk about, and that's Thanos. And I disliked the way that he was written. But KJ said something that I didn't think about during this recording, and that's how. And it's for me, it's all about storytelling. And I didn't see this on the first two viewings. KJ mentions how, hey, listen, Thanos was this way, and then after he saw the Nebula vision, he changed, right? And I didn't see it that way. And I didn't like that change, because one of the things that I loved about Infinity War, that movie belonged to Thanos, and he wasn't, I always say the same thing, he wasn't your typical mustache twirling villain. I could personally get behind what he was doing, as evil as it sounded. Like I was like, you know what? I can sort of sympathize with this guy. Like, he's not as evil as everybody is making him out to be. He is making a tough decision, a tough choice. But he had this one line in Endgame where he's like, hey, I'm going to enjoy doing this. And as opposed to using the Infinity Stones to kill half the population, I'm going to kill everybody and start everything from scratch and have them worship me. And when he said that, I'm like, man, you just totally ruined this character for me. Like, you just messed up this character entirely. Like, this wasn't who I fell in love with in Infinity War. And now, like, what I loved about him, what I love that he wasn't in Infinity War, he became an Endgame. And that was probably like the biggest issue for me with this film.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a difference, but I think what they were attempting to do with that was to really bring in the Thanos of the comics, who was that full-on villain, And I think this gave them an opportunity to bring that Thanos to the table, and they really did. And they really needed to have somebody with villainous intent at the end of this.
For the stakes to be that high, I agree.
Yeah. I really think so. Because that was the only way to up the ante. How do you up the ante from wiping out half of the population? Well, you wipe out the whole population. That's how you up the ante, That's how you do it. The character that I think that we could have gotten a little more out of in this one, I think honestly was Rocket. He was the only one that was really left from Guardians of the Galaxy. And we got a little bit of Rocket here and there, but I almost felt like he was used as a prop. And most of his scenes, other than the one where he's holding hands with Nebula, they're comic relief and they're kind of throwaway. And really, he had lost just as much as Thor had, and I feel that's why they paired the two up in that scene to go and get the stone together. But what ended up happening, it became Thor's scene because Thor's mother was there, because they were on Asgard, because he got his hammer back, because of all these other things. And Rocket really never got a moment there.
No.
He didn't. Yeah,
No, you're
he
right.
didn't.
Rocket basically was just a
I feel
prop man.
I feel that he was owed something in this movie, and I don't think that he got it. And so I'm really hoping that they will kind of dive into what Rocket's 5 years were like without everyone. And one of the neat things that you may not have noticed if you looked at Rocket's uniform in this movie, it had changed over to the Guardians of the Galaxy older style uniforms that they have, where all of the Guardians of the Galaxy actually kind of wore the same uniform. Mm-hmm. That's the uniform that he was wearing in this movie, that uniform from the comics. So I thought that was good, but like then they just didn't really expand on anything with Rocket, and the character almost gets lost, and it's one of the things that you've got Rocket, who's played by someone I think that's just a great actor. I mean, you got Bradley Cooper behind Rocket, and he's almost like second fiddle all the time. And I really think they could do so much more with that character. They really haven't dove into any of the aspects of that character. They always use him more as comic relief. Yeah. And I think there's so much more that they can do with it. And I'm really hoping that the next movie that involves the Guardians of the Galaxy dives more into that character.
Welcome back, everybody. We have to apologize. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. And Justin won't be with us again. He had a really bad tummy ache. He had a little bit of an accident, so he won't be with us, unfortunately.
He's at his mother's birthday party.
Oh, come on, KJ. Man, come on. I would have loved that.
So Lord Almighty,
we like giving Justin a very hard time, like too often.
I just really wanted it to the listeners to think that he had mud butt. That just would have been awesome. But
oh my goodness!
Back to our final topic, and this one was an idea brought up by KJ, where he was like, "Goose, you got to get this into the show. You got to make sure it's in the show. Who's the MVP of the movie and why?" And because KJ brought it up, I'm going to kick it over to him. KJ.
Oh, no! I got to be last. I got to be last on this one, man, because it's. I mean, you guys know me. You know who you. I know who you think I'm going to say, and it's wrong. So go to everybody else, then come to me.
Okay. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to kick it off as I usually do in other places of the internet. My MVP is a character. Just to be clear, my MVP of Endgame, right, is a character that I never thought I would have picked. When I saw the movie for the second time last night, it just really cemented it. I was like, yeah, this is the person. This is who she decided to be in this movie. And I think you guys can probably tell just like by my reaction when I started talking about that Pepper Potts scene. But Pepper is my MVP.
Yeah, there we go. That's a good call. I like that.
And it really just boils down to the sacrifice that she knew that Tony was going to make, and she let it happen, even though she knew that she could have been selfish and she could have told him, hey, don't go, especially at the very beginning. Like there's two very important scenes in that movie that made Pepper my MVP, and that's at the very beginning when Tony cracks he cracks the riddle, and he's like, hey, I can time travel, I can fix this, and he sits down to her, and they have that very nuanced moment where he's like, honey, if you tell me not to go, I won't go. You just say it and I won't go. And she just looks at him and she's like, but if I tell you not to go, you won't rest. And just how selfless of her to, with her daughter in her hand. No, her daughter wasn't in her hand. She was asleep. Sorry. But just, having a kid together, and just for her to say, yeah, just go, just like be a hero, save the world. And then at the end, right, I'm not going to talk about it because it's going to bring me to tears. It's going to make me crack again. But just, it's Pepper, man. At the end, for me, it was Pepper Potts. she was the MVP for me. And I know it's an unorthodox pick, and I didn't choose her to be contrarian or to be unorthodox or right, but I just connected with that relationship, even though you really needed to watch the other movies to see where that long winding road led to. Like, for example, a couple weeks back I watched Iron Man 2, and KJ sort of made me think about this towards the end of that film when him and Rhodey are gonna fight. Oh my God, the Russian character. I feel bad for not knowing his
Whiplash.
name. Is it Whiplash? Yeah, when they're gonna fight Whiplash. And after the battle, they're having like a conversation, and she's like, "I can't with this anymore. I'm tired of I'm the CEO." Blah blah. And then there's another scene with Pepper and Tony, and Black Widow is in the middle of it. And they're going back and forth, and she was like, "You were dying? Really? You weren't going to tell me?" And he was like, "I was going to cook you an omelet and tell you." And it just, like, that's what couples do. Like, that relationship was just so genuine. And, like, Black Widow's caught in the middle of it. And she's like, "Okay, enough. We have to fight." But anyway, that was a long-winded answer. Pepper Potts is my MVP, and she's a great character.
I like that pick, and the way that you broke that down, it really makes me think about it more. I think that's a really good pick, man.
Thanks.
Good on you for that. All right, Marlon, who's your pick?
Well, it's Thor. It's I gotta go with the Big Lebowski. He stole the movie from me from the beginning. From the beginning, when he saw him as a drunken buffoon playing Fortnite and just drinking beer, to finally finding himself and realizing that I'm not fit to be a king. I'm just gonna be the best person of myself that I can be, and just just have that. That's for me was like the best character in the movie. Yes, Captain America did tug on my heartstrings, and I could make the same case with Tony Stark, but for me, Thor, Chris Hemsworth really nailed it for me, because his comedic chops are like top notch, man. For me, that was like the best character of the movie. I mean, Gustavo's pick with Peppers is like, hey man, that's a good one. That's as good as it can get. But for me, it has to be Thor.
So, for me,
Drum roll.
okay. So anybody that actually knows me would say right off the bat, KJ's going to say Captain America. All right, that's probably what everybody thought I was originally going to say when I brought up this segment and everything else. So I was going to say Captain America because
that's too easy, though. That's too easy.
It is. It's too easy, but that's me. I mean, I'm pretty consistent, with the person that I am, and if I went back in time and I said to myself, who would you pick? It would probably have been Captain America, but it's not. My pick is Doctor Strange, and this is why.
Whoa.
Really? Okay. Please explain.
Had Doctor Strange in Infinity War, the movie before, had not said that there was only one option and then handed the stone off to Thanos, physically handed him the stone, then the Ancient One would have never given the stone to Banner in this movie. They never would have had the complete set of stones. They would have never known that they had to return the stones back to where they needed to be in time. And Doctor Strange is the one that opens the portal that brings the whole Avengers army through at the end. And had it just been Tony, Cap, and Thor, we talked about it, they wouldn't have made it.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have made it. So for those reasons, my pick, MVP, Infinity War, and for Endgame, is Doctor Strange.
I'm gonna
Hands down.
I'm gonna rebut you on this. Not
No
that you're
way.
wrong.
Can't
No,
do
wait,
it, dude.
wait. You have to let me explain. Actually, it's you're gonna like. I think you're gonna like what I'm about to say. You said that in another life, or I'm misquoting you, but you said, hey, in the past, I would have chosen Captain America because I would have been consistent with who I am as a person.
Mhm.
I agree with that. But I also say this: you were consistent with who you were as a person by choosing Doctor Strange because you thought about it in a very analytical way and just very deprived of any emotion. It was simply the most valuable player, and that was your guiding light, was it not?
Yep. All day long.
And that's
Yes, it is.
consistent. That's consistent with who KJ is.
You said it best, brother. You said it best. Uh, it's yeah. From my analytical standpoint, this would never have happened if Doctor Strange did not gave the stone willingly to Thanos. That made the Ancient One, as KJ said, realize, oh, okay, now I know
'Cause
something's going on. Okay.
Banner did not have the chops to be able to get that stone away from her. There was no way. She was not going to give it up willingly. And had Strange not done that, you would have never gotten that stone. We'd never have this whole series of events fall into place. So
And it's funny you say that, because when Doctor Strange looked into the future and he saw that 1 in 1.4 million, outcomes, or whatever the number was,
it was 14 million is what I think it was.
oof, it's like you could tell something was going to happen in Endgame. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew something was going to happen that was going to get us into like a big final battle between the Avengers and Thanos. The fact that there's an old saying, sometimes it's not the destination that matters, it's the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for this movie that plays out wonderfully, because that's what made every character just shine that way. It wasn't just getting the stones, it was what they had to go through to get the stones.
And it was a 22 movie journey, man.
Yep.
It really was. It was 22 movies of journey.
We
That's
love
one
you
thing.
3,000.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I will say about this movie that does, although there were some things that I wasn't happy with, there was a couple plot holes that I nitpicked at. I know that the best thing that this movie did was take everything that came before in those 22 films, and seldom does this happen in movies, but they were able to wrap it up nicely in a nice little bow tie and leave as little threads as possible open, which is probably like the biggest complaint we as fans have. Like, oh, they left this open, they left that open. And although they did leave those things open, a lot of it is, not core to the original 6 Avengers, right? Like their stories for all intents and purposes have been told. Right, Captain America had his send off. Tony passed away. Hulk is what Hulk had his little thing. Like every single one of those characters had a nice little bookend, whether we liked it or not. And seldom does that happen, in the medium of movies. And moreover, they were able to take the comic book medium and faithfully apply that. And KJ kept mentioning that throughout the entirety of this podcast, where, hey, listen, something in episode 10 pays off in episode 50, right? And they were able to do that, consistently throughout these 22 movies, and moreover in Endgame.
Yeah, and they really just did justice to comic book characters in general. They left a lot of, not all of it, but they left a lot of the politics and all of the nonsense, all of those things that we go to see comic book characters for, to get to escape. They left a lot of that out of it. And that's one of the things I enjoy. I go to all these movies with my youngest daughter. She's just a huge Marvel fan. She absolutely loves superheroes, and I'm so grateful that her and I are able to experience these together. It really is kind of a bonding thing for us, and I like that Marvel's able to do that, and able to do that so well that you can take a 13-year-old girl and a 40-something-year-old guy, and we go out to that same movie and we both come out loving it just the same. That's just really awesome. And there's something special about that. And I think that's the special thing about these Marvel movies that that really brings people of different ages, races, genders, whatever else you want to add into that mix, right? It brings them together, and everybody can set all that nonsense aside for a couple hours and watch a good movie and enjoy the time spent together, and all enjoy what's being played in front of them. What were you saying, Bruce?
I'm saying, and with that, unless you guys have anything else to say, because that is a great bookend to this whole show, this whole spoiler cast. The fact that these movies, you use your relationship between you and your daughter, how you guys bond over these films, like that's a great way to end this spoiler cast. And without further ado, unless you guys have anything else to say,
I'm good.
I want to thank everybody for tuning into Freelancer Radio every week. We're very grateful, very thankful. We're putting this out as a thank you to you guys. We hope you really enjoy it. Everybody have a great night. Freelancers, assemble.
Good night.